Once you start discovering your purpose, there's a reverberation that starts coming inside you to push you towards that. You can talk about big things like purpose, but I think before purpose comes survival. I think just the idea of stilling yourself down and watching your thoughts go and see where your thoughts are going is again a good metric for us to know really, where is our mind taking us. As an individual, you're facing challenges. The only way to walk out of those challenges is to grow. If you try to jump to purpose without knowing yourself, then that's a dangerous leap to take.
Some of the most interesting entrepreneurs have multiple aspects to them. My guest today, Harshil Karia, is one of them. He's not just an entrepreneur with multiple ventures, he's also someone who is a minimalist. He also has many aspects to him that all of us can learn from to truly build a multifaceted self within us. But before going to my chat with him, I want to make sure you hit subscribe and smash the bell icon, going straight to my chat with Harshil. This is the first chat we're having. I call it in the after times, because the last time we did a podcast was in the before times. It was pre-pandemic and I was still in the advertising world.
And now you're the Hrithik Roshan of the content creator world.
I blame Manish Pandey for all these insinuations that have come up, but I'm happy the fact is that even that time it was in person. We're doing this in person, so I'm happy that we've continued that trend of doing. I just find that the intimacy that comes with doing it this way.
Yeah,
I think you can get that.
You can't sense it, and so good to be here, and so good to see you.
Yeah,
and see everything that you're up to now and hear about it.
One of the things I've always, and I go back to the first time I think you and I interacted, and I think I spoke about it the last time we did a podcast, is that way back in the day when Glitch was just doing production, I think we connected on I think it was a Garnier project, the Dalmatians.
Yes.
The Dalmatians.
Spotty.
The Dalmatians who peed on Priyanka Chopra, if I remember right, on that shoot. And since then, it's been interesting for me to just watch your journey. Because I've always found that you make very interesting choices in a good way, because you don't like to stick to the regular path, but also I feel there's a lot of thought in terms of how you decide how you evolved. Is there something that you really wanted to be when you were younger, or it's been this evolving piece as you've grown?
I think like most of us, it's a process of discovery. Because if you approach each day with intention, and then you approach each day with trying to really say, okay, what's the maximum I can give into this life that I've been put into, then you start seeing little interesting corners and alleys, and then you're like, okay, that alley might lead to something very interesting, so let me really explore that. And once you've explored it, then you say that, wow, this really is me. Then you double down on it. So it's been a bit like that.
It's interesting you use the word intention, right? Because oftentimes I think most people don't understand intentionality as a concept, because we're always told to follow certain things, but intention is a tricky one to explain to people. How would you define intention for yourself?
The way I would describe intention is, so I think there's two parts to intention. One is to know yourself. So if you know yourself and you've really dug deep into knowing yourself and therefore coming to what could be potentially your purpose for maximum impact, and then connecting every action to that knowing yourself and knowing your purpose, I think that is for me intention. Really just bringing the two together, bringing the rudder together to know yourself and to know your purpose, and then bring that in. So, what the Japanese call ikigai, or what the Vedic culture calls swadharma. So really knowing that given all the parameters of where life has put you, all the parameters of, the advantages that you have, the life that you're born into, all of that, analyzing that, assessing that, and say that, okay, from all of this, really, this is where I can maximize my life from, and therefore this is linked to the, how I can be an instrument to make an impact on this world. And then looking at every action from that standpoint, am I getting closer to that? Am I getting closer to that? I think that for me is intention.
If you're going to break down in saying that, as you've progressed as an entrepreneur, has a sense of purpose become a core, like almost like a what's the word, navigator for you?
It has. And because often when you go through the speed bumps and the potholes of life, the reset that you can go back to is often your purpose, because that is the longest game you can play, and therefore you have to go back to that purpose. So like two things happened to me with respect to purpose. Somewhere around, and I mean, like I could talk about that a bit more, but yeah, it comes back to.
No, please talk about that a bit more.
So, like, for me, what happened is in somewhere around 2018. So I started the Schbang journey, not 2018, it was 2017, 2018, in the middle of that. It was about 2015 when I started the Schbang journey. 2 years into the journey, I was just about trying to survive. So, you can talk about big things like purpose, but I think before purpose comes survival. So you have to, so I decided I wanted to do this enterprise. I'd left back the earlier enterprise. I'm doing a second one. And really the first 2 years were just about going through, like
Riding
peaks
the
and
wave,
troughs.
yeah.
And, you can put on an Excel sheet that you will lose this much money. But when it's your own money that you're losing and you're bleeding that money, to really go through that is a challenging task in itself. So, I've been through 2015 to 2017 and survived. And then at the time I was trying to, I was sitting, and most of us have these moments where we discover that purpose. So for me, the discovery of that purpose was in a 2-day workshop. Classical scenario where you basically take a pause and you start to really know yourself. And which is why I come back to saying that, your purpose is linked to really knowing yourself. So I sat down, and 2 days we had to switch off. It was a group of about 15 to 20 of us from the team, working with my coach, Saloni Suri. So this is the first time I'm doing a workshop with her. And the first day was really me just shutting down and going through these self-assessment exercises. So I knew that, this was now coming to me that, okay, your people-pleasing orientation is high. Your ability to do conflict is a bit low. Your clarity is good. So then you start seeing that. You start seeing, okay, this is who I really am. And then there was a bunch of other things which we did in that. And the second day, we had to do an exercise in what was the golden hour, early in the morning, do a bit of reflection. And that's when in that golden hour, it came to me that, look, I've survived these 2 years of building this company. And I am going to turn this company into a global company born out of India in the marketing and technology services business, because there's no other company in that domain really which has established itself. So that's when I coined to my team on that second afternoon. I said, we will go from India to the world and bring the best of the world to India. So that really gave me a sense of anchoring and purpose. So then when COVID came, and when, we all had to go through those difficult times, considering to let go of people, etc.
So trying to figure out where things are really going.
Exactly. So that anchor of saying that that's how long the game you want to play, and therefore the speed bump that you've seen right now, which was a pretty big speed bump back then, is a small blip as compared to the longer game. So that is where I feel purpose really, kind of comes into the picture.
You also make an interesting point, right? Is that oftentimes you tend to believe that you need to figure out your purpose very early on, even before you start. But sometimes once you start on a certain journey and you have at least a few elements in play, I feel you realize your purpose far better. Like I honestly didn't know my own purpose till I would say a couple of years ago. When I did a similar exercise, I worked with my coach and she and I sat down, because I was literally saying, okay, been through this journey, grew glitch, we sold, I was considering exiting, but I'm like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. What is my purpose? And I never really sat and done that. I wasn't a believer. I would just think you do what you have to do, but there's a certain emptiness. And I think doing that for me, in some ways, I feel it shows you things which you already know.
Yeah.
but you maybe don't want to face because you feel it's, you use the word, you said people pleasing, and you again, and not really conflict, um, not really pro conflict in that sense. I feel that also adds to it, right? Because you don't want to pick out things which you believe might change what seems to already be working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you feel that? Did you feel that slight amount of like pushback from yourself?
I felt slightly different. So what I felt is that once you start discovering your purpose, there's a reverberation that starts coming inside you to push you towards that. So I think the moment it came down on paper that, these are the couple of weaknesses that you have, not really weaknesses, I wouldn't call them weaknesses, but this is where you are right now. And versus where you want to go, this is what you're going to have to work on to take that leap. So the inside starts reverberating and saying that, look, let's start working on it. And I'm pretty sure it's similar with you as well.
So the shadow, you realize what your shadow side is. You understand what you're trying to evade being by,
Yeah.
by trying to evade conflict, or by trying to, because I relate with those two, especially because that's something which I've struggled with for a long time. You also try pushing away from what you don't want to become.
Yeah. And then you start, then then the whole work of integrating with the shadow side versus just hating on it is a different work altogether. But, first that reverberation comes. And, once that starts coming in, you start like really, you almost have an internal booster in yourself to maximize yourself to, I kept seeing that this is who I am, this is who I need to grow into. And then further, this is who I need to grow into. So you start channeling yourself for growth. And I think that's the really fun part, because again, when you see purpose and you see who you need to grow into, that's the motivation for you to wake up every day and say, okay, let's do this, and that's, so one of the other things that happened to me after the first set of sessions, that first 2 days, I requested Saloni saying, let's fly down to Bangalore and let's do this with the team in Bangalore. And we had finished day one. Again, it seems like this day one has a theme. We had finished day one and I was sitting down with her for dinner. I had the opportunity, I wasn't working with her one-on-one yet then, but I had the opportunity to sit with her one-on-one. And because there was this reverberation happening inside me, I kind of put it to her saying that there's something I'm really struggling with. And thing I was struggling with at the time was that it was about, it was a good period of time where I was trying to get rid of a habit of smoking hash every night before going to sleep. And I usually try to take the opportunity to, whenever I get the opportunity in a platform like this, if there's a lot of young people speaking, to speak about it, because I was trying to get out of it for 2 years. And I was trying to get out for 2 years, and I would wake up every morning. My first search would be how to stop smoking hash. And there would be some research papers on what it's doing to your mind and things like that. But, that's the thing with an addiction, is the next morning you're back at it. So I opened up to her saying that, I hadn't really had the courage to say it to anybody that it's a problem. And I opened up to her saying that this is the problem that I'm facing. I'm not able to get out of it. And that night, she said to me one important thing. She said that, you're constantly getting high because you're not high on your own life. And it may be different sentences for different people, but that sentence really hit home with me. So it kind of permeated into my subconscious. And that night is when she gave me a meditation to try for the first time. So I feel like it had something to do with really permeating that message really deep into my subconscious, because that was the last night I picked up a joint. So I didn't touch it after that night. I went cold turkey. It's been 5.5 years. I haven't touched it. And I think that's a big, it kind of connected a little bit of this reverberation of the inside meets the messaging from the outside. And that's when I knew also that in this space of meditation, I want to do something. And then, different signals came as I went along that, this is a space that I should be getting into. But yeah, I mean, as we go along the journey, these things start happening to us.
I'm glad you shared that, right? Because you oftentimes give in to, like, for me that was smoking. Like, I smoked. I think till you started Glitch, I would smoke an easy like 10 plus cigarettes a day for a
Wow.
good period of time, if not longer. You're on a shoot, I would tend to do that, and I quit cold turkey because I realized that I was just like, I was like 27 and I was panting for breath when I was on a shoot or something like that. And at some point I had to stop. And this best, I found an opportunity at a time to stop because Rohit was my co-founder, didn't smoke, and only two of us started together. So best time to evade it. But I think back on that decision, and I think back on even sometime recently when I started to like look at food differently, change my relationship with sleep and mindfulness, is that there are moments when those choices come to you, and I feel that, like I said, use the word reverberation. I feel it's not just a singular choice. It's the environment you set yourself in. It's what you almost fed your mind, because you went through that day one and your mind was primed for you to
Exactly.
get into this.
Exactly.
Rather than you just focusing on what you need to change, you're almost curious about, okay, I want to see how this can kind of not be a thing. And I feel that, and I've been learning that curiosity plays a strong part in getting out of these habit loops, as you call them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's one thing to kind of latch on to.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's you use the word curiosity. I think also somewhere the pause is also very,
Yeah,
very
just hold on,
important. Just just to give that space to let that, and that's why I resonate with this idea of reverberance. So within that pause, the reverberance comes, because you give that pause and then you suddenly have a lot of, okay, let this reverberate and let it come to the top.
It's interesting that we're having this recording today. My last night's meditation, and I do guided meditation before I go to sleep, spoke about horizontal thinking versus vertical thinking. And it says that we're always on a horizontal plane in life. Right? You're figuring out, okay, what am I doing next? How are you moving ahead and all that stuff. And only when you pause do you think vertically,
Yeah.
and kind of look at it from a slightly longer sense. And I know we're using different terms, but we're saying the
The
same
same
thing,
thing. Yeah.
is that we got to take that moment to really make that choice, but also give yourself the opportunity to do it. Ever since then, have you seen yourself almost like tap into that, almost like as a mechanism when you want to make a choice?
Yeah, 100%. So I think, I've done two things. I've kind of programmed that horizontal vertical into my everyday. Because so the first thing I wake up in the morning is I'm really, really just trying to focus on maximizing that time to wake up in the morning, because I've realized that for me, I'm a very, very strong morning person. That's my time to really invest in myself, focus in myself. So the first thing I wake up is I try and sit and
Were you
write.
an early riser earlier? No.
I've always been an early riser, but not very, like not at the extreme of the morning. Now I just, like when everything is shut down, when the world is silent, that's the hour now I tend to enjoy the most. And I've always been an early riser, but I wasn't really looking at again with intention. So
So
again,
for me, it was a
intention is,
flip. I was like late night, wake up, just either rush to class in college or like run to the office at like whatever. And I've had to switch, and I think my switch happened more because of becoming a father, so that was an automatic switch. But sorry, I wanted to go on about your morning.
yeah, no, I was saying that one is to, coming back to what you're saying, which is the horizontal and the vertical, kind of programming it into creating more opportunities for that. So programming is basically being able to create more opportunities for that. So in that morning, the first thing I would sit and do is that sit and write down what was awesome about yesterday. So tomorrow morning, I will write about how this conversation about the horizontal and the vertical specifically was very, very awesome about this day. So what you're doing is you're actually looking, you're training your mind to look for those moments of what was awesome, what most people call gratitude. But I just like to write it about what was awesome about yesterday. So I'm looking for those moments of awesomeness, and then I'm getting my mind to find that. Then I'm just trying to do saying that, then within those moments of awesomeness, you will again find strands of those horizontal and vertical. Then I'm trying to do a bit of prioritization. So I will try to prioritize what I need to do at Shbang. I will try to prioritize what I need to do at Level Supermind. So sit down and then be really clear so that I know, again, with both these companies, this is what I need to do here, this is what I need to do here. Because otherwise, between the urgent, important, and all of that, you'll get caught. So in the morning, if you've done that, then that's good. And I think what works for me is also, if I write it down to permeate it into the subconscious, I then immediately follow that with a meditation practice. So effectively, what you've tried to program into your mind is then going into your meditation practice. And then often what happens in the meditation practice is that you will again find spaces linked to the priority and linked to the gratitude, which will open up the horizontal and the vertical, which then when you have time to yourself, you will then reflect back on. So yeah, I think that's really the parts for me, trying to ritualize that. And then when you have your moments where you're sitting, you will be able to, regurgitate all of that together. So that's how I try to do this horizontal vertical. What is it with you?
It started off as routine, but I've realized that ritual is a far more powerful thing to do, right? So my mornings are pretty set because it's a school wake up. So I try to get up about half an hour, 45 minutes before my daughter has to be woken up.
Which is at what time?
So she has to be in the bus at 7 a.m., which means I'm up at about 5:30, 5:15-ish every day. But I only wake her up by about 6-ish. So I get a good half an hour, 45 minutes in before that. I started something I call a grounding practice. It's not something which I came up with. It's something I do anyway, is that I have 2 dogs at home and I wake up in the morning and I clean up any pee or anything else that's been left over. So for me, it's you start your day by saying, oh, this is ground zero. You got to start your day with that. And I occasionally journal.
Yeah, for me, that's making my bed.
Yeah, because you got to do something which is a grounding activity. And for me, this naturally became my thing. I wake up to that, as weird as that might sound. But and then I journal occasionally. I don't force myself to journal every day. I realize that whenever I force myself to say, this is what you do every day, I don't do it. So for me, it's a few times a week. But whenever I do it, it's with intention. I woke up with a thought, I want to put it down on paper. And sometimes I'll do that at night. But I realize that giving myself that flexibility of journaling helps me do that far better. And just literally for me, it's more a thought experiment. Whatever's in my head, put it down there. Something comes to my mind. And then I would say post sending her off to school, I try to do some days a shorter meditation, but I don't end up doing more than 5-7 minutes. I still haven't crossed that 7-10 minute boundary. 10 minutes actually is where I've reached so far. But I'm hoping over time I get to a longer period. And for me, it's the workout. It's the workout and a few things like the lime water I drink in the morning, or the fact that I spend time with my son who we had 6 months ago. I think some of those pieces for me, I have certain things I do with my daughter, with my son. I say hello to the world with her when I wake her up. With my son, I have a few things that I've started to do with him. So for me, it's been building those rituals, which I almost use as a...
Yeah.
But the one thing I'm not the best at is what you said, is to set the intention of what you're going to be focusing on at work. Something I'm trying to do a little bit more. But my problem is, even when I do that, I don't end up sticking to it. If people behind the camera will laugh here, I can see a few laughs are behind, because I will never stick to it. The standing joke in this space is that whenever I go for a break, which is a holiday or weekend away, I come back and change a lot of stuff around, because I suddenly get that time to pause. So the worry for everybody here is that when Varun takes a pause, he might change too many things. I prefer what your system is to kind of set clear intentions daily and move with that.
So I do it on Monday morning, where I set it for the week. And then I break that into chunks on every day. So Sunday evening, I really take the time for that. I mean, again, I don't have 2 kids. So, I'm not investing my energies there. So I'm investing a lot of that energy inwards to really figure that part out. So that's the advantage. I mean, I think again, each one, the bits that you have its set of advantages, and I'm just trying to play to my strengths in terms of what kind of life I've been put into. So the week bit, I think really, it was day, but I also saw that when I'm just doing it by the day, it's meandering a bit. But then when you do it by the week, at the start of the week, and then you chunk it into days, then the chances of meandering are significantly reducing. And I'm now trying to get to a month into the weeks. so that it's a bit more structured. And I felt like I needed to do that because once we were given birth to Level Supermind, what started to happen is that I really wasn't able to prioritize between the two.
Yeah.
So then I sat down and said that, look, I need to be able to program myself to be able to do this, because otherwise I'm swayed.
How did that choice happen? How did that choice happen to say that, obviously Schbang's grown to the size it has, and there's obviously a lot happening there, and there's international expansion, etc. Then Level also happened on the side. As an entrepreneur, it's a choice to make things. One thing, this is one which you already have a certain level of focus on, to do another. Like you said, how did that reprogramming happen? How did it start?
Again, I think it's so it linked back, to 2018, that bit where I went cold turkey. So that was one big kind of point for me, saying that, look, this is it's helped you this way. And then I started reading a bit more about a meditation practice, and turns out only 2.5% of the world is engaged in some sort of a meditation practice, with maybe 0.5% having a daily practice. But then I started reading more about it, and I said that, it has compounded effects in terms of what it can do to our minds and what it can do to our lives. So I started implementing it on myself. Last 5 years, I've basically been an experiment. I myself have been the experiment of a strong meditation practice. And then I started trying to understand in terms of the altered traits, what it does. So the most fascinating thing for me about meditation was, if I had to really simplify it, in meditation, often, you call this the third eye particularly in some of the chakra kind of schools of meditation. This is what they call the third eye. What the third eye is basically, again, a focus, which is your prefrontal cortex. So here is your prefrontal cortex. And what you call here the crown chakra is basically the seat of the central lobe of your brain. And what a strong meditation practice is doing is effectively increasing the connectivity between your prefrontal cortex and your central lobe. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the part of our brain which is responsible for our character. Effectively, if I'm oversimplifying, but
it's the planner, it's the where self-control lies, where everything.
It is what makes Varun, and it's what makes Harshil. It's where the seat of intuition lies. It's how we can sense things. It is, from where the impulse, or even the intuition, rather, not impulse, but the intuition that I should stop doing what I'm doing and really focus on this, or I should do Level Supermind. So that's where it all comes. And then your central lobe is through your spine, connected to your eyes, to your mouth, to your hands. And what we effectively call a more integrated person is one where your character is equal to your actions. So it's kind of increasing the connectivity between your character and your actions, and it's strengthening your intuition. It's also strengthening your character because you're kind of shutting yourself down and really focusing there. And it's also kind of making you more aware of your actions. So I started realizing that, look, it's become very ubiquitous to go to the gym, to go for a run. But this, for some reason, has its connotations as being spiritual or religious or something that our parents told us to do. So, and I was seeing the impact on my life. As again, through 2020, as we were speaking about, between March and April, for me personally at Schbang, was it was a bloodbath, because you had 75% drop in billing between March and April, like most of us, and then you had to deal with decisions. Do I lay people off? How should I be thinking? So again, in those moments, the pause between stimulus and action, I was seeing the impact of the meditation practice playing on me, saying that I'm immediately thinking 20 years ahead. I'm immediately, attracted to try to learn from what Azim Premji is saying at Wipro, which is that if you compound your growth over 35-40% year on year, and you look at 5% efficiency, what you can effectively do is, you'll be building a very large organization over the next 10 to 20 years. So I said, what am I looking at this at? And that's when I, kind of reflected back and said, we'll keep everybody in their seats. and we will work hard and we'll go through it. So 2020, our team size was about 300 odd people. We're today, almost 1250 odd people. So the perseverance to go through that, being able to see that, and then also communicate to the teams more clearly, I saw those effects. I was also seeing a lot of time freeing up for myself as a result of just being more focused. So I said, I have to do something in this space which is attracting me. And that's when I went to the person who speaks most publicly about meditation in the country. And we met interestingly at a premiere of Tanmay's movie, Chintu Ka Birthday. So that's when I saw Ranveer after many years. And I said, let's hang out, let's chat. And then, we kept in touch, we kept speaking. And then we said, we both are itching to do something in this space. Let's do it together. And, that's when finally it turned out.
I remember one of the first times I heard about Level. I don't know if it was even called Level at that time. Was when I was on a call with Ranveer, and he mentioned what the idea was. And in his usual... The energy levels on that phone call were very high on one end, and me being calm and listening on the other end. But I feel what's intrigued me about how it's grown is that, the tendency always is to say, okay, let's kind of like almost do a cut, copy, paste of a lot of stuff that works. But it looks like there's been a certain amount of time spent on really making sure how do you make this both unique but also like very relevant to what the use case is.
So I think I learned a lot, to be honest. I'm so grateful I took this journey. I'm genuinely very, very grateful that I took this journey because, again, when you do something new, you start to open new skills and new parts of your mind. The mistake I made at the start was, I want to do this. Being a marketer, I made that mistake. I want to do this. And then you have to start eating humble pie because you're actually serving a consumer. So now we do roughly 120 consumer calls every week, with them each being about 20 minutes long. So we are really trying to solve specific problems. So a lot of it then went into building the product to tailor make it to the consumer. And we realized that what people are basically talking about, saying, hey, everything that you're telling me about a meditation practice, I'm convinced, but I don't know how to start. So a lot of the work started around introducing people to the practice. So we have, we've got 3 to 4 minutes of every day, because again, the science was telling us that a consistent practice for 3 to 4 minutes every day can start having 100%. Impact. And then we started doing, saying, a 7-day introduction series. So you got 21 days of 4 minutes followed by 7 days. And we also started seeing that people were saying that, look, when I open up any of these other apps, I'm seeing it in English. I don't connect with it. So that's when it became clear to us that we need to do Hindi guided meditation. Today we are in Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, Tamil. We are in Bengali. We have Telugu coming soon. So we have, we are very clear that the idea of connecting with yourself and the idea of the mother tongue is also very, very interrelated. So that's what we started to do. So one problem we were clear we needed to solve is, how do I start? And second problem is, how do I continue? And that's when a lot of the work now is going to habit loops. So if you finish the first meditation, it asks you to commit for 3 more days. And again, the science tells us that when you commit to yourself, that's the biggest, that's the biggest motivator that you can have. So you can commit for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, and then it keeps reminding you to do it. And that's the first part of the journey. And there's so much more work to be done because, again, meditation itself is such a vast field that you've got visualization, you've got breath work, you've got allied to breath work, the school of mindfulness, and then you've got the mantra chanting and the mantra meditation, which I think is, again, a very big unexplored part of meditation, because once people start to understand what the mantra is really doing for you and why you are connecting with that mantra, then that itself has, the ability for people to transform themselves through. Because again, what a mantra is doing is it is creating reverberations inside of you and then creating that. So I'm most excited about doing that. So it's such a big journey that it is so exciting to be able to go on this journey. And then there's the other parts, which is the journaling side. So we're releasing soon a journaling product where we've really thought about how do we create these journaling loops and create these journaling habits, and then how do you do things like yog nidra to put into sleep. And then also in yoga, we know that people are talking about saying, how do I begin? And with workouts, how do I begin? So we know the audience we're going after, which is, people who are just at the doorstep of saying, I want to transform myself. And then there are so many avenues that you can find yourself once you've gone into that door. So we are basically trying to create the most welcoming, entry into this world of growth for you. And that is what we are really, really focusing on.
You spoke about a very interesting aspect in just building trust, right? What started off as saying, this is what I want to do, saying, okay, what do you need? And to actually listen to a consumer, listen to the other person and understand what they need and build towards that. I want to tap into trust building a little bit, because I feel with every entrepreneur's journey, anything you build, one of the things we don't, learn fast enough, or rather sometimes you learn it, is that just how you build trust. Do you feel you kind of like gotten deeper into understanding the methodology and just like how to really look at even trust as a factor now?
So interesting, this point of trust.
Yeah.
At Schbang, we have a principle which we've plastered on the walls, which says, our word is our bond. I think there are many dimensions to trust. One is, the first dimension, I think, is to do what you say. That's, the standard de facto. Like, if you don't do what you say, then you cannot be trusted. The other way to build trust, to do what you say, again, if you look at that as the pinnacle, do what you say consistently, is trust. Then the segues to that are very interesting. Because the segue to that, again, and if I relate it back to Level Supermind, is that when we get a negative review on the app, and there are days when we get a 1-star rating, this is not happening. The culture inside the team is, we straight call the consumer. We try to understand what's happened. And we have a policy that, within 6 hours, we solve for that. Then we call the consumer again. And we say, we've solved it. This is what we've done. Can you look at that rating again? And most of the time, the consumer will turn that 1 into a 4 or a 5. So, again, that's another dimension of trust. And then if you see, again, if I look back at the services business with Schbang, or like what you would have done with Glitch, again, consistently, trust comes from delivering on, I'm promising this to you, I'm delivering. I'm promising to you, I'm delivering. And the compounding effect of that
100%.
is significant.
I've always there was the early days, you'd always be asked, why aren't you doing more PR or any of those things? And you were like, no, just like literally the fact that someone trusted you to do a good job and you do good enough job, that is something which they will tell, it'll resonate with other people who might also want to work with you. And
yeah,
it's actually the factor that can compound the most to move you forward than anything else in the world.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, does, this point you're saying about do and, then the world will see, how do you view that in today's world, I feel also a bit of FOMO about, how visible can you be? And I'm sure you're navigating that as well. So how do you view that? It's a little different from that simpler time, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I struggle with it often. For me, it's the tonality, right? And I'm saying this, and I know this is a conversation we have as a team very often, is saying, if you're saying, I know this is what I have done, that's you just giving yourself this thing. But if you're focusing on creating stuff that's genuinely giving value, like everything you put out there in the world has to give some form of value. Otherwise, people will call you out for it. They'll obviously see that you're just trying to self-promote. And I feel understanding that balance is important. Even if you're talking about something that you've done, you have to give an actionable insight for what someone else could use. And if it's not giving that, either it's a personal piece. Like sometimes I'll share something very personal out there because I just want to. It doesn't have to be actionable for anyone. It could literally be something which I want to talk about. But often enough, what I feel you should be wary about is creating your own echo chamber. Because the problem with social media is that you have FOMO from everywhere, right? You want to go for summits, you want to go for every single conference. You want to be in every social platform possible. You need to put up so many times in a day. And at some point, there's this stoic line of saying, is this essential? You just got to keep asking yourself that, is this something you really have to do? And I feel that kind of brings you back down to...
Yeah, that's a good way to reset. Is this something I really have to do? And sometimes the answer will come, yes, you really have to do this because you know, the value that you've put on this piece needs to travel.
Exactly.
And that is why you really have to do it.
Exactly.
Or, hey, let's take a step back because, you know, we're getting a little exuberant with this, or we're getting carried away with this, or we're not really doing this with intention. Again, to the point of what is intention is, you know, again, to bring it back. Yeah, is it required?
Because then you also realize which parts are being driven by your ego and which parts have actually been driven by your purpose, right? If it's driven by ego, saying, no, I want to be... And you're like, one second. And for me, I feel a lot of this, to be very honest, initially it was a lot more about, okay, I don't necessarily want to be out there as much, which is very weird for me to say right now. But initially I was always the person who didn't necessarily want to be in the forefront. I was always like, I prefer managing the back end, prefer being in the background. But once I made the switch to doing this and being out there, I feel for me, what grounds me back, pulls me back is I focus on I focus on family and close friends and saying, is a weekend away from home for me to go for a conference essential? Or if there's something I have to do that day with, say, my daughter or with a friend, is that essential? And often that helps me make that choice very easily. And sometimes I do pick that conference. Sometimes I do pick that and I go there, but it's conscious. You've decided that, you know, you weighed both and you say, no, this is something I should do.
Yeah, I think for me also it is, for me, the anchor is that go back to the purpose.
Yeah.
So then that becomes a good lens for any action.
I know we've mentioned the word purpose a few times, and what do you think people get wrong about purpose?
I think people try to, I don't know, I mean, I haven't really introspected about what people do, but I think I can, you know, with my own experience, I think I tried to define purpose without knowing myself. So if you try to jump to purpose without knowing yourself, then that's a dangerous leap to take, because sometimes it's coming almost from a whim. I mean, and whim is a very difficult, I mean, it's a complex word.
Yeah.
It's a heavy word to use, but really without knowing yourself, without knowing your ground reality of who you are, where you stand, you know, what your potential is, what your limitations are, what your shadow is, what can you get triggered by. And then, you know, the composite knowing of all that really flowers open the purpose. So I think the first step for me was to know myself. And that is why also I, you know, went back to sharing that with you, that it was really that first day where, you know, and we spoke about that, which is you need to give yourself that pause or that curiosity of yourself to be able to open that pathway. So it's kind of, you know, very, very clear that is the way. First, know yourself.
Because knowing yourself is also scary for many people, right? You worry about, like, because I feel we hide many aspects of ourselves from ourselves. Like, you don't want to address the actual... It's very easy to point the finger at a situation, a person, or like you said, giving yourself almost like a purpose statement without actually digging into yourself is like you giving a product a tagline without understanding what the product is or what the consumer wants.
Yeah.
And in this case, you are the consumer also. So
yeah,
you see these lines plastered oftentimes. And I've always had this thing about offices having lines on the wall. But if you dig in deep enough and you build it right, then that line makes sense. It adds to what you do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just becomes words on the wall.
Yeah.
And understanding that difference is where purpose lies.
Exactly. Yeah. The, you know, when you were speaking, I'm just reminded of the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. You know, what is happening is that Arjuna has entered the battlefield and he's asking Shri Krishna, saying that, you know, almost with exuberance, without knowing himself fully, asking himself, let me just see who has the guts to fight against me. You know, and that is what you spoke about, the world. Let me see outside. Let me see who is gathered here, and almost with this sense of exuberant ego. And what happens at the end of the first chapter is he is effectively, gets into a state of putting down all his weapons, saying, I can't do this. So but I think also with that, there is a lesson that when we are, perhaps that's a process that we need to go through, which is that we need to blame the world. We need to look at the outside to be able to arrive at this place where I am just putting everything down, saying, okay, it's not the outside anymore. I need to look inside, which is where the second chapter comes in. And, the thing that Shri Krishna is doing is he's jolting Arjun, saying, wake up, my friend, and first know yourself. So I think that's a natural progression that you kind of, I wouldn't judge people who are looking on the outside, because I've done that myself also. I'm sure you've done that yourself, which is
all
that,
the time.
That we, and that's a process that we have to go through. So that's the way I look at that, but then the faster you come to arrive at that saying, come, let's now try to know ourselves, the better it is, and the faster you can get to those effects of compounded. And I think, again, just to add also about the process of meditation, I think just the idea of stilling yourself down and watching your thoughts go and see where your thoughts are going is, again, a good metric for us to know really, where is our mind taking us.
It's interesting you spoke about that exchange in the Bhagavad Gita, right? There's that whole part where he's told that your skills are not yours to own. You're just a vessel.
You're an instrument.
Just the instrument, right? For you to be able, you're helping them pass from you to others. It's not about you owning it.
Yeah.
And there is no better controller of the ego than that, right? Because you also, I'm like this, sir. I've done that. And it's especially like one of my, and I've spoken about this in the past on some of the recent episodes, is that I remember being at one of these summits, and one creator spoke about how many people came and took selfies with him. And I saw a sense of genuine ego-filled pride. But in my head, I'm like, once again, they're taking selfies with you, and you can have momentary joy with that. But don't suddenly get driven by that. That's not the driver of what you do. If that is what's driving you to create and do what you do, then, it's taking you down a path which you don't want to go down. It's again, you're the vessel, you're not.
To the people who were at that conference, I said, I want to tell them that Hrithik Roshan ke sath selfie lene ka opportunity miss kar diya aap log ne. So next time dhyan rakhna.
But it's interesting, right? Is that it's all around us, and especially in social media now, it's like it's the easiest thing to get driven by. Oh, that person has this. This is what someone's done wrong. This is what's happening. You just get driven by that versus you're evading the main thing, which is to.
And it's not easy at all. It is
the toughest thing.
It is really, really tough. So the only place for me, that place where I can come back to my center constantly, is through that practice every day. So the moment I have paused within my meditation practice, it allows me to reorient towards, okay, this is your purpose, this is your center, this is where you got to go. This is not so important, while it is top of mind. The other thing I've really understood in this process is that I used to look at, this anxiety, fear, jealousy, all these as bad things. But I started looking at it as good things, because, there's a friend of mine, he and I were having this discussion saying that, why couldn't there be in human beings an alarm? Say, ki you are going wrong.
Yeah.
But actually, if you think about it carefully,
it's there.
The fact that your mind has gone into that zone of, pompousness or jealousy or fear, that is your alarm. That is the self-created alarm, which is the reason for you to come back to the center. So, it's kind of changed, again, knowing yourself, that when does that alarm really come? And what scenario do you create that alarm? And therefore, then how do you construct your life around you?
This is point of your internal voices versus chatter, right? There's actually a book called Chatter, and it was interesting to understand that you always assume that your internal voice is telling you things, but it's not always telling you the right things. It's oftentimes telling you things that you're either being self-deprecating or you're self-critical, or it's telling you putting negative thoughts in your head, and that's chatter. Versus your true internal voice is actually telling you the right things, and for you to learn to differentiate between those two also requires you to be able to not be rushing through life. Is to really be able to, again, like, take that moment, take that pause, and really say, one second, I'm separating the noise from what my mind's telling me. And again, I know we've spoken about meditation a lot on this, but I think that both meditation internally as well as the way you live your life externally both add to that.
100%. So, I mean, the way I look at meditation is the image is very clear in my head. It's like this corridor, and on one side is knowing yourself, and on one side is knowing life. So it is a corridor, one of the many corridors through which you can walk through that corridor, peek in to know yourself and peek in to know life. And then this balance between the two, it almost like, the spine between the two, which kind of lets you come back to say, okay, now let's start knowing ourselves. Now let's start knowing life. So it's a bit, that is what it is to me.
And I spoke about external living also because I think the last time we met pre-pandemic, you were moving towards minimalism. Have you progressed further in that sense? Is what the many changes which I've seen you make in your life, which is also kind of, you're setting the environment right for you to live with the kind of purpose-drivenness or intention-drivenness as you do now. How did that external change happen? How did you bring yourself to that?
Something in me just said, remove all the attachments. So that, then it started. Then it started saying that, clothes is the first thing. I think clothes actually already happened before that, because, when I left FoxyMoron, so you have a big fat salary. And I think at that time when I left, I would say at my egoistic highest, to when I started Schbang. So roughly you are earning 5-6 lakh a month at the time to going down to 20,000 bucks at the time. So automatically, you have to change your lifestyle. So that was like one accelerator. But when we said let go of attachments, then, let go of dependencies of other people on your life. So I said, okay, I'm not going to have somebody drive me. I don't like driving, so I will bike everywhere. It's faster. It's
parking.
It's easier to park. It's faster. It's nippier. Then I started saying that, okay, if I have to bike everywhere, that means I have to sweat less. If I have to sweat less, I have to really watch what I eat. So I have to make sure that my food has got, the exact composition which makes me not sweat. So that's what I started doing with that. And I said, okay, if I'm, I've got this same, it's a friend of mine, Mohan Vilas. He says, he's a monk actually. Very interesting story of a guy who was peak of his material career and then decided to become a monk. But he said one thing which stayed with me is like, all I need is my 4 pairs of clothes to be able to survive. So I said, let me try to do that. So when I travel, can I pack my whole 2 weeks, 3 weeks into a small cabin luggage? So if I have to do that, then my closet has got to get less, less filled in that sense. And I mean, I still enjoy the things that make the world amazing. I still love that. I marvel at a great painting, or I will look at I look at your space and say it's amazing. But the desire to own a space like this is significantly lesser. The desire to enjoy the space in this moment for what it is, and then maybe request you after this that, Varun, can I just sometimes come and hang out with you here and see this space with you and enjoy this space with you sometimes is there, but it's a transient life. And within that transient life, how can I enjoy the most of these experiences is how I'm trying to structure my life at this point in time. And I hope it accelerates in this journey, because, again, the thing with life is that you set yourself out on one thing and then, there is another fork down the road. But I'm enjoying where I'm at right now. I think at a good If I had to pause, it's a good place.
And also, like like you said, as much as you make plans in life, life has other plans. One of the
Yeah.
best lines I've heard, because that's so true.
Yeah.
And I always like to close off conversations in a way that you leaving something for the audience to want for a part two in that sense. But I want to actually close up by asking, saying, was there ever a piece of advice through this period that really resonate with you? And I know you spoke about after the first day, but beyond that, has there been anything else that has truly been something which someone said to you that has almost become central to you?
Yeah. The answer to any challenge is growth. And that has many dimensions. So if you're running a company and your company is facing challenges, the only way out of that challenge is to grow. If you, as an individual, you're facing challenges, the only way to walk out of those challenges is to grow. So I know not too many people like Reliance, but they have a nice line, growth is life. And that is so true. So that has stuck with me, the idea of consistently growing, no matter what the scenario, deliver growth. So that's what I'm trying to live through.
Yeah, because you have to progress, and I couldn't resonate with that more. But thanks for doing this, Harshil. It's been fabulous to have this chat. And
thank you for having me.
Yeah, and hopefully we shall do a part two sometime soon enough.
Yeah, if there is more to say. I mean, that's also good. Actually, that's a good challenge, right? Because with things like this, with people like you, and that's the amazing part of what you do, which is that to be able to come on to speak with you, you have to have had, pushed yourself. So in a sense, you are a marker for a lot of people to continue to grow. And at the same time, you're also accelerating your growth journey
by learning
in so many different ways, not just by learning, but by doing and, being who you are. So, so you're that, for a lot of us, that profile we look at and say that, look, this is a reminder again, go back to growing.
In my general awkwardness, I will say thank you for that. And, when you said this, I have to put this here because last night I was watching an interview of Chris Williamson, the podcaster, and he said something. He said that I never got to study psychology, but I choose who my professors are by calling them into my podcast. And I feel for me, my journey has also been just literally the conversations I have with people like you. And so that helps me learn and evolve my own mind and life more. So thank you for being the professor for the day.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.